morning, everyone. Good to see you. So let's just recap. So this is our last class. Again, kind of taking a look at the end of Saul's life and his reign, and some of the tough situations that he got into, some of the bad decisions that he made, and how that because of that, his kingdom is going to be taken away from him and given to a neighbor of his, which obviously was David. So just very quickly, 3 strikes to Saul, 3 instances where Saul made a bad decision based upon pressure that he was feeling, probably internally, of course, but also externally, offering before Samuel got there. And that's a tough one, at least in my eyes, anyways. But I'm not the judge of these things. He was in a difficult situation. He saw this massive force of Philistines, and he's like, I gotta sacrifice to God. God has to be on my side. But that was not his role, right? His role was as king, and there was a clear distinction between the role of a king and the role of a priest, which Samuel was. He took on that role of a priest and prophet. And so he gets chastised by Samuel, and he's told by Samuel that what is going to happen? What is going to happen to his kingdom?
Away from him.
It's going to be taken away, Gordon. Yeah, it's going to be taken away and given to another person. Jim, Halloween's over. You can take off the mask now. Ah! I thought about that yesterday. I got to go goof on. All right, strike 2. This was an interesting one because Samuel and his armor bearer actually wrought salvation for the children of Israel against the Philistines. Remember, the Philistines had garrisons set up, to kind of keep the Hebrews in check and to prevent them from getting stronger. They had taken away their ability to do what? Remember, we read about this last time?
Make iron weapons.
Iron weapons, thank you, Ave. Yeah, they couldn't make iron weapons. There was no blacksmith found in Israel at the time, and so they just had to use farm implements that they sharpened to use as weapons. The only people that had weapons were the Philistines, definitely, Jim?
Saul and his kids.
Yeah, Saul and his kids, right? So kind of the elite warrior class of Israel. They had the weapons. So not a great situation, but Jonathan in his faith and in his action are going to go up. They're going to fight this garrison. They're going to win, and there's going to be a great victory. But Saul is going to make one of these rash vows, right? And what was this vow? Who can tell us?
No one gets to eat until all the Philistines are dead.
Okay, no one gets to eat until, remember Saul made it about him? Remember the wording? Until I be avenged of my enemies, right? So, again, you can kind of see the change that is happening to Saul from a very humble individual that wasn't really sure that he was ready to be a leader, ready to be king. He had this burden, even though he's a big guy and physically imposing, he still had self-doubt. But as he kind of grows into this role, he becomes very, very self-centered and, makes some bad mistakes. And then strike 3, let's take a look at this. This is about the Amalekites. And so this is in Samuel 15, 1 Samuel 15.
Somebody else to read?
Not
me.
Oh, not you. I see. Okay, I can read it. Verse 2. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and women, infant and suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and ass. And so that account is actually written in Numbers. But if we take a look, let's see, I think Deuteronomy 25 talks about this. Yes. Let's see, 17 to 19. Yeah, so, this is actually a direct quote here from Deuteronomy. Remember, in verse 17 of the 25th chapter, remember what Amalek did unto thee. by the way, when you were come out of Egypt. He smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not God. Okay, so there's another place that I don't know where it is now, but there's another place that God says, I will forever be at war with Amalek. And God was upset, not necessarily just because they were Amalekites, but because of what? What was really the cause of kind of this animosity between the Israelites and the Amalekites? What does it say here? What did they do?
They destroyed the weak in the back of the
Oh.
the back of the retinue.
That right. So you have the kind of the line of and they're marching right through the wilderness. Amalek attacked the weakest. They attacked the women, the children, and also the feeble. Right, people that were struggling to keep up. And so that was abhorrent to God, because in God's mind, in particular, if you look through the law, there was always the law that said you had to help the fatherless, the widow, the weak, the feeble. Right? There was always that caveat within the law that you had to keep the weakest among you in good health, or try to, anyways. Right? That's why you couldn't glean your fields. Right? You couldn't take everything in your field. You were to leave something for the poor. Right, and so and there's several other things in the law. So God recognized the Amalekites for what they were. Now remember, Amalek. Who was Amalek's grandfather? Anyone know?
Agag? Sorry, I was going the other way.
Agag was the king, right? Agag is going to be the king that Samuel was going to hew to pieces, right? Chop him up. Amalek's grandfather was Esau. Okay, so Esau, so there's a relationship there, right? So it's almost like a family squabble as well. The Amalekites and the Israelites were related by blood. And so, you have really relatives going at each other, and the Amalekites attacking the weakest. So anyways, so God wants judgment for this. And so we don't have to read the whole thing, but in any event, Saul takes up the charge. He says, "Okay, let's go. I'm gonna take care of it." Verse 7, Saul's gonna smite the Amalekites, but let's verse 8. But he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and of the oxen and of the fatlings and the lands and of all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them, but everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. So Saul is going to make a determination that, you know what, I hear what you're saying, God, but you know what, I think I'm gonna save Agag, because I think I can probably make a deal with him, or ransom him, right? And this happened quite a bit in the ancient world. You captured a high-ranking noble or a high-ranking king. You captured him, and then the people would pool all their resources together to get this guy free, right? And so I think that's what Saul was looking at. It was a way to make money. It was a way to enhance his own stature as well. Or in other cases, maybe make a league with him that benefited Saul and his family. We're not really told, but he was told to destroy all of the Amalekites, to stop them from making these raids in the south. And I should have probably put up a map. But the Amalekites were in the south. And so again, we're talking about the pressure that the Israelites were under from the south, from the Amalekites, and also from the west. The Philistines are kind of crunching them together. So, you have to take care of the Amalekites down south. Saul does this to a certain degree, but saves the best for himself. And what's the reaction, right? Then came the word of the verse 10. This is kind of sad. Word of the Lord came the word of the Lord unto Samuel, saying, "It repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he has turned back from following me, and hath not performed my commandments." Right? That's true. I mean, and so God is like, I've tried to work with this guy, working with him through you. I've tried to direct him. He's just not listening. He's making his own crazy decisions. He's a very rash guy now. He's not taking advice. Remember, Saul is going to take a lot of advice from Samuel and from other people. And he's going to have a different mindset when he first becomes king. This is different now, right? He's making his own decisions. And I think that comes with experience. He has more confidence. He's been very successful up to this point with different battles. He is a great warrior. And it seems that he's relying less and less on God and Samuel and more on himself. And so what's Samuel's reaction? And I think this speaks to the closeness of this relationship. That Samuel loved Saul. He saw so much potential in Saul to be one of the great leaders in Israel, in the Hebrew history, to be their savior from the oppression of the Philistines and the oppression of the Amalekites and the Amorites. But he blew it. He just made bad decisions, right? And it grieved Samuel. Upset him greatly, right? He was very upset about it. And he cried unto the Lord all night. Right? So I think it's a very sad statement that we find here. And again, it shows the closeness and the love and the care that Samuel had for Saul. And it hurt him deeply. It grieved him that he had to go tell Saul the bad news and he wasn't going to be king anymore, right? And so, verse 13, Samuel's going to come to Saul, and Saul said unto him, Blessed be thou of the Lord, I have performed the commandment of the Lord. Look what I have done, Samuel, it is complete. What meaneth then the bleating of the sheep in mine ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? How come I hear animals? I thought I told you to kill everything, right? Now, Saul's response is very interesting. They... right? Referring to whom? The people, right? Yes, the people, right? They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed. Hey, yeah, Samuel, we're just saving this for God. It's the people. The people made the decision. What could I do? They're the ones that were... it wasn't my idea, right? It's kind of like Adam and Eve, right? The woman that you gave to me, it's their fault. Then Samuel said unto Saul, Stay, and I will tell thee what the Lord hath said to me this night. And Samuel said, Say on. When thou wast little in thine own sight, wast thou not made the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed thee king over Israel. So that's interesting. Samuel's using these same words that we've talked about. When you were little in your own eyes, right? When you didn't have a lot of not self-esteem, but you didn't have a lot of self-confidence. You were put in this situation. You were hiding amongst the stuff, remember? When you were little in your own eyes. But I made you, I anointed you king. And the Lord sent thee on a journey and said, Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites. Wherefore then didst thou not obey the voice of the Lord, and didst fly upon the spoil, and didst evil in the sight of the Lord? That's interesting, that idea of flying upon the spoil. Because that's exactly what happened, with Jonathan and the Philistines, right? Saul says, no one's going to eat. And the people in... Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Jim broke my glasses, everyone. No, I'm going to do one of these old guys. Did they? Well, let me see. You sure? Okay, all right. See what we got here. But they ran into other, problems with the spoil as well. So there's the spoil of war is going to cause problems for Saul in both of these cases, in strike 2 and strike 3. The first, with strike 2, with the Philistines, he said no one is going to eat any of the spoil, and people are like, listen, I'm starving right here. So they go and they kill all the, and they don't cook it and they just eat it, raw. And then here, and this may have been, I'm just kind of thinking this through. This may have been Saul's way of making up for the last time they went out to war and prevented the people from getting any spoil. this may have been a compromise on Saul's part to placate the people who he refused the spoils of war against the Philistines. Okay, I've got this command of God, but I'm going to justify it. The people, you know what? I prevented them from getting the spoil against the Philistines. I'll allow it with the Amalekites, but as long as I sacrifice a certain amount to God, I think God's going to be okay with it. And we can kind of see that justification. You know, we do it a lot in our own lives, don't we? We justify things in our own mind. You know, it's really crazy some of the things you tell yourself, right? Particularly, you know, when you may be making a bad decision, right? Justifying bad decisions. Anyways, so we have the very verse 22. But so Saul again tries to justify what he's done in verse 20. Yea, well, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, and have brought Agag the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the spoil, sheep and oxen, the chief of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God in Gilgal. Now, that may be true up to a certain point. In other words, do you think that the people got all of this spoil to sacrifice all of this spoil to God? No, of course not. They're keeping the spoil because it's how you made money as a warrior back then, right? They wanted to get paid. They weren't going to give it to God. And so Samuel says, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. So that's interesting that Samuel is using this idea of witchcraft as well, because what is Saul going to do? God is going to withdraw his guidance from Saul. And so where is Saul going to turn for guidance?
Witch of Endor.
The witch of Endor, Gordon, that's right. And so, it's that would be an interesting study, is, what were witches in the ancient world like? And I've done a little bit of research on this, but usually they were women. All of them were women, but they had usually healing powers. In other words, they knew a lot of the herbs and stuff like that could actually help people get better in a limited sense. But because they had that power, they also were believed that they could speak to the dead, that they were a conduit to the spiritual world. So you have, women who tended to be widows, okay? A lot of them tended to be a little different too, kind of ostracized from society. You have all of this knowledge as well that maybe has been passed down generation to generation. You know that, hey, if you take this berry and you mix it with this, and this will help you clear your sinuses up, or maybe you have things that will ease the pain, things like that. So they become almost magical. And so they're given a lot of power. But it was also steeped in paganism, right? It was also steeped in idolatry. And I think that's what really the big reason why that God looked down upon these witches, that they presented themselves as having power, supernatural power that they didn't. And a lot of times, just like today, it's a lot of flim-flammery, right? I have the ability to talk. Hold on. I'm seeing a dog. Do you have a dog? Yes, I do have a dog. All right. So after this, so Saul says, I've sinned, I've transgressed the commandments of God, but I feared the people and obeyed their voice. That's interesting. Because again, we go back to strike 2, right, with the Philistines. What did the people do?
They obeyed Saul.
Say that again.
They obeyed Saul.
In what instance?
When they wouldn't eat the food.
Okay, so yes. Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Sorry.
So I got you. You're absolutely right. So they obeyed Saul. They said, okay, we're not going to eat, but they were faint. And then, what did Saul do when he found out that Jonathan was the one that tasted the honey? Right? What did he do?
Execute.
He wanted to what?
Say he was going to execute him.
Yeah, that's right. So he was going to execute Jonathan, right? Oh, you're going to die, buddy. And what did the people do with Jonathan?
People said no.
They said no. The scripture says that the people saved Jonathan, right, from the craziness of Saul. And so I think these two they're connected because the people had pushed back on Saul. And the people also, I think, recognized that Saul could be manipulated as well. That he could, if you push back on him enough, he will acquiesce to what we're doing. And I think this is what happened here. You have, the last time we couldn't get any spoil, we're getting spoil now. And Saul's like, ooh, okay, I got to keep the people on my side. I almost lost them with this Jonathan thing. Right? So these things do not happen, these stories do not happen in a vacuum, I guess is what I'm saying. A lot of times all of these things are connected, right? Questions, comments on this? All right, very good. So after this, let's see. Yeah, so Agag is going to come. Agag came unto him delicately in verse 32. You know, Samuel calls for Agag. And Agag said, surely the bitterness of death is past. Agag's like, I dodged the bullet. I survived it. I'm being brought to Samuel, which really was the spiritual leader of Israel. Agag maybe thought that he could, talk his way out of it, that he had been spared. That he could make a deal with Samuel here, but he certainly misjudged it, right? As thy sword, Samuel says, has made women childless, so shall thy mother be childless among women. And Samuel hewed Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal, right? So that might have been quite the scene. Remember, Samuel was a very old guy as well. Now, granted, Agag was unarmed, but Samuel was an older man, but he still had the strength, to take this sword and take care of some business. Now, here's the verse, right? 35. And Samuel came no more to see Saul until the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord repented that he had made Saul king over Israel. So, think, let's try to put ourselves into Saul's shoes, right? He's got this tremendous burden of being king of Israel. Oh, you want to be king? Okay, well, here's the deal. You got to deal with all of these problems. You have internal problems that you have to deal with. You have external problems that you have to deal with. And now the one person, your wisest counselor, the real conduit to God, the prophet of God, the priest of God, doesn't see you anymore. Doesn't see you anymore. Imagine how crippling that would be to a leader, or to any of us, a very close, advisor, someone that we loved or cared about, that we relied upon. Now, for whatever reason, they're taken away. Think about the psychological impact of that for Saul. Given the fact that Saul is already, and I think these things are slowly kind of building up in Saul. And he's going to go, I wouldn't say crazy, but he certainly is suffering from this point on. Severe doubt, periods of like manic behavior, increased out of control paranoia, right? He thinks Jonathan's going to kill him, right? Take his throne. He tries to kill Jonathan. He's trying to kill David several times, right? As we're going to see. That relationship is not a good one. And so Saul is extremely paranoid. And I think it can be traced back to a couple things. Number one, Samuel was going to tell him that his kingdom is going to be taken away and given to another. That's number one. And then number two, he doesn't have Samuel anymore to rely on. That relationship is done. It's gone. It's over. And Samuel really is in the dark. He's lost. He's lost. And there's no direction there. All right. Any questions on that? Comments? Jim, these glasses are all right. You're okay. All right.
I would be sad if I didn't get to talk to you for a
It's
while.
got. You have an interesting.
Yeah, don't chew on.
No, I'm not.
Don't chew on
This got something
Don't chew
on
the
who. All right. 1 Samuel 16. So the last verse, 35. Samuel's really very well written. It's really a great story, just like it ends, right? This chapter right here ends with Samuel mourning for Saul, right? Verse 1 of the 16th chapter. How long are you going to mourn for Saul? God asked Samuel, right? Seeing I've rejected him from ruling. Stop, it's like stop crying over spilt milk. What's done is done. You got to move forward, Samuel. I think Samuel, like we said, was like, oh man, this is so bad. So bad for the country. Saul was the guy. And maybe in Samuel's mind, he thought that maybe through prayer and supplication, maybe he could change God's mind or change his direction. I don't know. We often can do that too. We ask God for certain things that in the end, it wasn't God's plan. God had other plans for us. And I think Samuel was in that, predicament. Yeah, I accept God. And he had this, God talked directly to Samuel, which was fantastic. But I think Samuel continued to talk to God and see if he could maybe, redeem Saul in some way. And so he says, fill thine horn with oil and go, and I will send to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king amongst his sons. It's interesting, God doesn't say which son, right? It's like, yeah, Jesse amongst his sons. He could have said, yeah, David, the youngest one, the ruddy one who's out in the field. He doesn't say that. One of the sons of Jesse are going to be king. And so Samuel says, whoa, how can I go if Saul finds out? If Saul finds out I'm anointing another king, he's going to kill me. So already, Saul, I think, is showing behavior, unstable behavior, right? That now he's going to kill Samuel, his trusted advisor, of someone that he loved. He's going to kill him because he's anointing another king. I understand it from a political point of view, right? You're anointing another king. It's a complete and utter betrayal, right? It's treasonous. They come, so all of the elders, this is interesting in verse 4, and I think it speaks to the power and the respect and the authority that Samuel had. Let's take a look at verse 4. Samuel's going to do what God says, right? He comes to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming. Right? Oh, Samuel's here. What did we do? Why is Samuel here? And they asked him, "Hey, have you come in peace? Are you coming in peace, or are we in some big trouble here?" Right? And so he says, "Oh, I'll come in peace. I'll come peaceably. I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice. All right, so here they come. They were there on Eliab, the first one. He's the oldest. Probably another, good-looking young man, strong, well-built. Firstborn, always the best.
I second the motion.
Oh yeah, Jimmy. Surely the Lord's anointed is before him. Oh, this is it. He looks great. Very famous words, right? The Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, nor on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, the Lord looketh on the heart. And so those are some great words, directly from the word of, the mouth of God. He speaks to us. He says, don't look on the outward appearance. God doesn't look at the outward appearance. Care less how big or strong you are. He's looking at the heart. Is this person going to be a follower of me? Is the next king going to love me and do everything in his ability to follow me? Is he going to follow my directions, right? Saul was tall and, he looked the part of a king. And remember, the Israelites wanted someone to play that part, didn't we? We need a king to go out before our enemies, someone to lead us. Well, we gave you Saul. He looked like a great warrior. He was a great warrior. But his heart was not with God. He got just kind of wrapped up in everything, and he forgot about God. And this is going to be the major difference, right, between Saul and David. It is recorded time and time again that when David was faced with adversity, and he had a lot of it in his life, he always turned to God. Right? Abinadab in verse 8. Nope, not him. Shemaiah. Nope. Again, Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass. Verse 10. And Samuel said unto Jesse, the Lord hath not chosen these. And Jesse's like, are you serious? Like, these are the guys right here. These are my sons.
So that says something a little bit about Jesse, doesn't it? That it's 7 times that he messes up and picking the right one.
Oh, what do you mean, Jesse or Samuel?
Jesse.
Oh, like bringing, I see.
Yeah, here,
Well,
let's try this.
yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, like, oh, I'm 0 for 7.
If he knew
0 for
David's
6.
heart
Yes.
and Saul's heart, the difference between the two and
Yeah.
what God was looking for.
Yeah.
It's,
But, Jesse is also looking at it from a very natural point of view as well, right? He's like, I'm just going to go down the line because remember, being the firstborn in ancient Israel, well, you got a double portion, like you were the guy. And so it wasn't the first one, okay, maybe the second born, maybe the third born, maybe all the way down to 7, and you don't want any of these guys? And so Samuel's like, do you have any sons left? God hasn't chosen any of these guys. Yes, Kat.
No, I wondered how old was David? Was it because he was so young, or?
Yeah, so I've heard that, he was a teenager. In what age? He was young. He wasn't, like, he was so young, I guess, that he wasn't even there. Like, surely Samuel doesn't want to see, you're out in the field, right? He
I
had,
wondered if that might have been.
yeah, I think it's possible that Jesse said, there's no way that Samuel wants David. Like, he's just a teen, he's a kid. He's just a kid. He doesn't know anything. And this is, well, let's see. Yeah. Eliab, this is actually going to cause a lot of kind of jealousy and animosity with Eliab and the other brothers with David, right? Because remember when David, we may or may not get to this, probably not. When he goes to fight Goliath, Eliab goes, I know what you're doing here, right? And David's like, what are you talking about? I'm just bringing you some cheese and bread, right? And so there was definitely some animosity between Eliab and David. Anyways. There remaineth, verse 11, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. Like, yeah, I got one more. He's out with the sheep. We got him out in the field. Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. So, that's interesting too. Samuel is he's laser focused on his job, right? He's not dilly-dallying. He's like, we're not doing anything until I figure out who I'm anointing here. Because this has gone sideways very quickly. I thought this was going to be a very quick deal. Jesse brings his firstborn Eliab, and boom, I anoint him, and then we can sit down, we can have our meal, we can sacrifice to God, right? Let's see. Verse 12. And he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. Now that's interesting. Doesn't mention David's heart here, by the way, right? It says that he was good looking. He had nice complexion. He was handsome, right? Good looking guy, good looking kid. Goodly to look to. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Now it's not mentioned here, but I think it's mentioned that it's obviously mentioned that David was a good-looking, young kid. But God wasn't necessarily concerned about that. He was concerned about David's heart. And we know that David was a man after God's own heart. And that word is used specifically, right? Because Saul was not. And God looks upon the heart, and he found in David's heart somebody that he could work with. He found in David someone that loved him, that wanted to do his will and everything. Then Samuel took the horn in verse 13 of oil, anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. David is going to be anointed with the holy oil, right, in front of his brethren. You can kind of imagine that scene. Very awkward, I would imagine. The Spirit of the Lord is going to come upon David at that time. All right? Did the Spirit of the Lord go on Saul when he was anointed? Yes, yes, right? He remember the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul and he prophesied. He was prophesying. Spirit of the Lord is going to come upon David. Who, Jimmy, you want to read that next verse? What does it say there? We are in 14 of 16. Yeah.
But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him.
Okay. So the Spirit of the Lord is going to depart from Saul, but he's going to have an evil spirit as well. Okay? Now, I think this verse actually speaks to, I think we talked about some type of mental illness that Saul is dealing with here, right? Remember in the ancient world, everything was attributed to demons. We kind of laugh at this stuff, like, ooh, I'm demon possessed and all this other stuff. But to the ancients, they felt that there were things that would possess your body and take your body over. And so you can imagine Saul's servants seeing Saul one day being like, you know what, I'm the king, everything's great, he's on top of the world, everything's fine, and then maybe a couple days later, he's depressed, he's paranoid, he's violent, he's angry, and so you have kind of these ups and downs that Saul is going through. And what's the one thing that kind of calms him down? Music, right? Music. Calm him down. David would come and play, for him, right? Play that song for me, David. And I don't even think they did. They probably said to David, like, hey, go in, he's crazy today. Go play it, right? He goes in there with his harp, and Saul calms down. But there were other times, too, that, that Saul is going to try to kill David as well, right? So, when Saul was in one of his moods, he was probably not the guy to be around. Everyone's like, listen, he is in one of his moods. He thinks everyone's out to get him. Yeah. Who wants to go in and talk to him? Oh, not it. All right. Any questions on this? All right, which brings us to David and Goliath. Great story. Now, David and Goliath, right here, David defeats Goliath. We hear that a lot in modern vernacular, don't we? That's kind of one of these phrases that we immediately know. Maybe not as much as in the past, but, David and Goliath, everyone knows about that. Like, well, what does that mean? What does David and Goliath mean? Well, what does David and Goliath mean? Like, what's the...
The underdog with the...
Yeah. The underdog beats the big supervillain, right? Or the smallest beats the biggest, right? And it was so, it was something like a crazy victory that no one saw coming, unexpected victory over some powerful entity, right? And and actually modern day Israel, they looked at this like the War of Independence in '48. It was a total David and Goliath situation. You had small little Israel using these kind of weapons that they had from World War I, fighting off, the Arabs, all of the combined Arab nations trying to get them. '67 was the same thing. So this is kind of part of folklore status, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And that Israel looks at themselves today as David, right? Little David against the Goliaths, they're enemies of the world. And they have a lot of enemies, not just the Arab nations around. They have a lot of, enemies that are out, that are very vocal, that are out, in the light of day. But they have a lot more enemies that are in the shadows, right, working against them. All right, and so this is why, they have the Star of David as well on their flag. So this David and Goliath thing is a very big thing in the culture of modern day Israel, right? We're still David. We're still little David. So let's just let's see. In 17, now listen, we could spend a couple classes on this, but I'm just going to kind of go through. We'll try to get through this. So let's just try to look at the scene, right? You have chapter 17 talks about the Philistines are on one side on the hills, right? There's a hill here, there's a hill here, and in the middle there is a valley. Okay? And so the two armies are just kind of eyeing each other up, right? See what's going on. Now, in the ancient world, during this time, we're probably talking about, like 1100 BC, 1000 BC, somewhere around there, 3,000 years ago. Okay? The way that they would conduct warfare would be a lot like what we're reading about here, like very, kind of like Bronze Age type of thing. There was a transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age, right? We're right in the middle of that transition. But they would all have heroes, right? And the hero would go out. One army would have a hero, go out, see what you got. The other army would send out their hero. They would have a mano-a-mano, right? Jim is on one side, I'm on the other side, right? We'll see what we got. Okay? If Jim kills me, his army is going to be emboldened, right? And they're going to rush the field and try to kill everybody else. If I beat Jim and I cut off his head and hold it up, my army's going to go crazy. And they're going to go and they're going to, kill, they're going to have the upper hand. And so after the champions fight, whoever's the victorious, 9 times out of 10 are going to win the battle because the other side is going to be demoralized psychologically. And this is what was going on here. You can just imagine a massive giant of a man coming out for, I think it was 40 days, right? Comes out, and he's just belittling the Hebrews, right? Saying all kinds of stuff. You guys are you dogs, can't fight, you're awful. We're number 1, you're 0. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And so this goes on and on and on. Let's see. So in 11, so he does this, they spend some time in kind of talking about the army the armor that Goliath has, just poof. He's ripping on Saul. Saul is nothing. He's a puny man. What are you, servants to this puny man? He's nothing. I'll kill everybody. Verse 9, if you be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. So, Saul should have been the one that was going out there. Now I don't know how old Saul was or what his condition was or whatever it was. But Saul wasn't going out there for whatever reason. You were the king. The people finally wanted a king. We need a king, so he can lead us out into battle. Okay, well, here's your chance. We have a battle. Hey, Saul, where are you? He's not going out. And so what does it say? It says, verse 11, and when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So this is really an example in Scripture of psychological warfare. And this is exactly what Goliath was doing in the Philistines. It's actually very smart, right? Over and over again, you send out your biggest and baddest guy. And here's the thing. I don't think, Goliath is just kind of going out there and just like giving speeches like this. I think he was showing his prowess as well. Like how, doing things with his armor, throwing his spear, taking his sword out, doing all kinds of like physical things to intimidate the Hebrews, right? And it's working. Like, when Saul's like, I can't do anything about this, and everyone's always like, yeah, it's very scary, right? Completely understandable. And so David comes in. Now, granted, the Spirit of the Lord is upon him. I think one of the reasons why, too, that Saul is so dismayed is, God had withdrawn his guidance from him. Samuel's not around either. So this is like the biggest crisis of Saul's kingship, right? What are you going to do? We're in some dire straits, and so it's up to David, right? And he goes, let's see, he's gonna bring food to his brethren, and so when he brings food, so he's not even of fighting age right now, and so it kind of speaks to how old he was. If he was of fighting age, he would have been in the ranks. He wasn't, though. He was a younger guy, a younger kid, probably teenager, 16, 17 years old. I think the army of Israel, if I remember correctly, it was 20 years old and upward, right? So 20 was the actual age of a warrior. So he was younger than 20. Let's just put it that way. And so his job was to bring supplies. I'm going to bring supplies to my older brethren. They were all there. Okay? And this kind of goes back to what Samuel had warned the people about. Like, yeah, okay, you want a king, but anytime he sees someone goodly, or someone that can be in his army, what is Saul going to do? Conscript them, right? Guess what? You're fighting the Philistines with me. Oh, okay, I guess so. Let's see. And so it's interesting. You know, Saul's trying to cajole anyone to step up. He says, the king, you know, they're telling David exactly what Saul said. Have you seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel he has come up. Speaking of Goliath. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. So he's really, you know, it's like finding Osama bin Laden. Well, what did the United States do? They put a $25 million bounty on his head, right? And then do that with a lot of terrorists. And so Saul's doing something, he's kind of sweetening the pot a little bit. Like, hey, you can be free in Israel. You won't be taxed. You won't have to give any of your possessions to me. You're going to be free. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to be conscripted into my army. You're going to have a lot of power. You're going to marry into my house. You're going to be part of the family. Were there any takers? Hey, Saul, you have some beautiful, beautiful daughters. They're really good looking, but they're not that good looking, right? And so everyone was very afraid, and it's up to David, this young boy, and say, you know, verse 32 is interesting. He says, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and will fight this Philistine." Right? And Saul's like, Who is this? And Saul says, You're not able to go fight the Philistine. You are but a youth. You're just a little guy. You're a little guy. Settle down, little guy. For he's a man of war from his youth. He's done one thing and one thing only, and that's fight from the time he was very small. But you know what's interesting? You know, David was a shepherd, but you know, he also, you know, got into some scraps. Now, not with people, but with a bear and with a lion, right? And David's going to mention that if we turn just one last thing. He says, thy servant, verse 34, kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went out after him. All right, see David's bravery. You're going after a lion, a lion and a bear, and deliver it out of his mouth. So the bear, you know, had the lamb in his mouth. And I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. All right. Right, and he saves the little lamb. Now, this is interesting too. And, you know, again, you can spend a lot of time on this. You know, for one lamb, David is going to risk his life. He's going to risk his life for a lamb, you know? How many of us would do that? You see a big lion come out and wow, snatch a lamb. Most of us would be like, oh, you know, that's nature. Poor little lamb. You know, lions have to eat too.
That was his favorite.
That was his favorite. Well, who knows, right? But, you know, I think it speaks to Jesus in his parable about the 99, right? The 100, you lose one. How many will you go and find it? Good shepherds find the lamb. David was a good shepherd, and he risked his life for a lamb against the lion. And then just the last thing, these events in David's life as a child is going to reinforce and strengthen his faith in God. And it's going to make him not only a better person, but a great king. Because you're going to have an incident with the bear, you're going to have an incident with the lion. He's going to take on Goliath, right, with his sling. Cut his head off, show it to everybody. Great victory is going to be wrought by David. Saul has killed his thousands. David is 10,000s. Saul is going to make him part of his, he's going to be his armor bearer, right? He's going to be part of his military entourage. But slowly but surely this interaction is just going to fall apart. He's going to be his father-in-law, right? Saul's going to be David's father-in-law. He's going to marry Michal. It's all going to fall apart because I think Saul is going to recognize, ooh, this is the guy that Samuel's been talking about. This is the guy that's going to take my kingdom. And Jonathan, my own son, is conspiring against me. And so, boom, now we have the stage that is set for this intense civil war that is going to happen within Israel at this time, between David and the followers of David and Judah, right? Saul and his followers in the tribe of Benjamin, kind of fighting for control of really the heart and soul of Israel. And that's where we'll leave off for now. Questions, comments?
Can you recap?
That's next time, Yvette.
They coming back.
All right.